President Truman arrives at Flushing Meadow 5 years to the day after his historic proclamation, which announced the beginning of work by the United Nations. Mr. Truman dramatically calls on the World Assembly of Nations to bring about real disarmament through control of atomic and all other weapons. Then, the President says, vast sums now being spent on rearmament could be used for world betterment. In the reception that follows, the President greets the delegates of the 60 United Nations. Among them are Russia's Andrei Pashinsky and Soviet Security Council delegate Yakub Malik. America's Warren Austin and Eleanor Roosevelt. The UN anniversary is hailed around the world. Here in Paris, already the United Nations has a record to be proud of. Peaceful settlement of disputes in Palestine, Indonesia, and India. And now the successful defeat of aggression by a truly international force in Korea. By ceremonies like these, this one in London, led by Britain's Prime Minister Attlee, the free world reaffirms its belief in the United Nations' future. The ceremonies reach their climax in Berlin, where 250,000 West Berliners gather for the crusade for freedom and the dedication of the Freedom Bell sent from America. Stirred by the United Nations victory in Korea, but still facing the challenge of lasting peace, free men know that the surest weapon for peace is freedom. This is the message the Freedom Bell sounds behind the Iron Curtain as America's General Lucius D. Clay gives the long-awaited signal to let freedom ring. The Battle of Korea draws to a close. Pyongyang, the Red's capital, lies in United Nations hands. That's Pyongyang below. Its capture is an inspiring and historic birthday present to the United Nations, 53 of whose 60 member nations supported the military campaign. Burning red equipment marks the way as UN forces roll forward. As the prisoners are marched back, it's forward, ever forward, despite renewed red resistance, to the border of Manchuria itself. British Argyle troops enter the town of Yongguk, 25 miles north of Pyongyang. Here, the red defenders put up little fight. 8 American GIs who have looked into the face of death wait to fly to Tokyo. These were among the few United Nations soldiers who escaped their red captors during the communist retreat northward. The final knockout blow to the reeling enemy is delivered by American paratroops. The United Nations Supreme Commander, General Douglas MacArthur, looks on as 4,000 hit the silk, closing the trap on 28,000 communist troops. After watching the great drop, General MacArthur sets down at Pyongyang to confer with Commanding General Walton Walker before returning to Tokyo. High on a wind-swept hill near Incheon, Marines of the 1st Division hold memorial services for 400 of their comrades who died in the liberation of Seoul. A final tribute to brave men who gave their lives in the fight for peace. On his way to his historic meeting with General MacArthur, President Truman arrives at Hickam Field, Hawaii, after an overnight flight from San Francisco, and is greeted by Hawaii's Governor Ingram Steinbach. The President heads for a luncheon of military and civilian leaders in Pearl Harbor. The President expresses optimism for peace.
In one generation, we've come from an isolated republic which considered itself entirely safe with an ocean on each side of it. We've come from that position to the position of the leadership of the world, the most powerful nation in the world, and as the most powerful nation in the world, we have to assume world responsibilities. I'm not one of those who thinks that another world war is inevitable. I'm just as sure as I stand here that the people behind the Iron Curtain are just as anxious for peace as I am. I am just as sure as I stand here that if the truth could be gotten to those people, there would be peace in the world, and we're going to get the truth to those people, and we won't have to do it with guns, I'm sure.
Then the president takes off for Wake Island, the tiny coral atoll 2,300 miles away. The president's plane arrives at dawn, and America's commander-in-chief is met by the United Nations commander-in-chief in Korea, General MacArthur. A tiny coral building on the island the Japs conquered in 1941 is the site of formal meetings attended by top officials, including Secretary of the Army Frank Pace, Jr., and the Chairman of America's Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Bradley. Before leaving Wake, the President adds a fourth cluster to the Distinguished Service Medal of General MacArthur. As the principals depart, they announce that their conference brought agreement on future peace and security in the Pacific. The cause of the United Nations is speeded forward in a major conference on the historic Pacific island of Wake.
In communist-threatened Western Germany, the good news is that Western military leaders under General Mark Clark are helping build strong defenses. Here on Special War Games, military observers from all the Atlantic Pact nations watch Operation Rainbow, the largest Allied war game since World War II. Over 100,000 troops participate, including French and British units. Objective of the maneuvers is to force back a theoretical enemy who invaded from the east. Should the Reds strike here in Europe, the Atlantic Pact forces will be on guard. In the German capital, economic progress is marked as the Berlin Industrial Fair is opened by former ECA chief Paul Hoffman. The exhibit shows the first products of a developing free enterprise system stimulated by the Marshall Plan. In France, the city of Caen, like much of Europe almost completely destroyed during the war, is slowly but surely rising again due to Marshall Plan aid. Caen, the center of bitter fighting in the Allied invasion of Normandy, is being helped by ECA funds. Its people have lived in ruins through 5 harsh winters, but are now moving into the dozens of new buildings which the French have constructed with American help. In the Netherlands, the Dutch tackle their own housing problem with their own prefabrication system. First, they build a latticework cement frame, which is caulked and pieced together. The separate sections are joined. The Dutch are desperately in need of 300,000 new houses. Traditional methods of building are too slow, so Dutch engineers developed this speedy new method after studying in the United States. The house is almost complete, and the last pieces of wall are put in. In 6 days, a plot of unbroken ground has become a home for another Netherlands family. The Norwegian town of Kirkenes, above the Arctic Circle, is another war victim coming back to life. The main industry of Kirkenes, its high-grade iron mines, has been reopened, and 3,000 men are back at work with United States-built mining equipment. This hard-hit community is recovering its prosperity through its own hard work and valuable American help. In southern Italy, long one of the poorest sections of Europe, an economic change brings good news. Redistribution of land begins as thousands of Calabrian peasants meet in village squares to draw lots for almost 4 million acres of public and private lands being parceled out by the government. There's some argument from peasants who came out best in last year's widespread but illegal occupation of the land, now being legally divided, but generally everyone is happy. The program, announced several years ago but long delayed, will end the medieval farm system which bound generations of peasants to great tracts they could never own. Europe is again reaching an independent status, and that's good news. A collection of 150,000 original models from the U.S. Patent Office is sold in New York. This 1876 children's doorway swing, like this scale, which printed both weights and prices, never succeeded, but the washboard became famous all over the world. This chair bed was designed for crowded living quarters. A cabinet bed is a similar idea. The inventor was ahead of his times, for double-purpose furniture is increasingly popular today. Roller skates are pretty much the same in our streamlined age, but this washing machine, invented in 1866, is a far cry from today's push-button wonders. A spark catcher smokestack to prevent forest fires, and a modern-looking steamer chair. It's a pity for future collectors that the Patent Office no longer requires working models. At Tulane University, Professor Lo Sang Tsai introduces his cooperation machine, designed for a unique experiment in animal relations. Looks complicated? It's really very simple. Into the first compartment go Joe the rat and George the cat. Tradition says they're enemies, but Dr. Tsai has brought them up together from childhood and they love each other, especially since they've learned through experience that neither of them can eat unless he cooperates with the other. Those two floor plates must be pushed at the same time in order to get at the food. What teamwork and what appetites! Now the two animals are separated. So Joe the rat, by stepping on another floor plate, lets George the cat into his compartment. Watch them push those food buttons. See, it's easy. Dr. Tsai believes that if these natural enemies can work together, then people should be able to cooperate even better. And these happy cats and rats really prove his point.
In France, a race from Versailles to Paris brings out 30 cars built in the days when Grand-Père was wearing short pants. Before burning up the road, some of the old cars begin to burn up. The race, if it ever gets started, is for the benefit of the war-damaged city of Isigny. The hatches are battened down for the wild ride ahead, and they're off. And now they'll prove that the auto is here to stay. Ahead lies Paris, and who knows, fame and fortune. Francois, your wheels are loose. En garde. The winner is a 1903 de Dion Bouton, and Vive la France! The renowned 400-year-old Spanish riding school of Vienna, making its first appearance outside Austria, demonstrates a horsey ballet at Rye, New York. Its Lipizzana horses are virtually the only ones in the world capable of performing the school's difficult maneuvers. Now they're scheduled to take part in horse shows in the United States. Horses and riders shift into a herringbone pattern. This classical style of riding, once the delight of the glittering courts of Europe, is today almost extinct. Most difficult exercise is the capriole, a leap and kick once employed by armored knights in battle.
of New York Harbor. These young ladies have just graduated from, of all things, a water skiing school where they mastered the techniques of aquatics from A to ski. And now the ski line is off on a sightseeing tour of the 30-mile-long Manhattan skyline. The co-ed zooms up the teacher's boat in a difficult maneuver. Boats are a hazard as the skiers reach downtown Manhattan. Their course takes them through some of the most dangerous waters in the New York Harbor. The trip ends as the graduates pass the Statue of Liberty. And now, out into the cold, wet world. Brrr.
3 years after the 19th century began, the Louisiana Delta, a large swampy wilderness abounding in game, was purchased by the United States from France. At first, the Americans sought only the Delta area to allow a free exit from the Mississippi Valley through the port of New Orleans. But the purchase was enlarged to include a vast fertile land reaching from the Gulf of Mexico to the Canadian border as far west as the Rockies, over 1 million square miles for the price of only $15 million, about 4 cents an acre. It was the foresight of men like the third President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, who saw in this great territory the future of America.
On the Mississippi and on the shores of these great lakes, inland commerce from the North Atlantic to the Gulf.
On December 20th, 1803, in New Orleans, the French garrison formally turns over the province of Louisiana and its accompanying territories to the representatives of the United States government. Thomas Jefferson's dream took the first step to becoming a reality. For the French and for their emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte, it is the end of colonial ambitions in North America. As the stars and stripes go up and the tricolor comes down, the size of America is doubled. Out of the Louisiana Purchase will be formed the states of Louisiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, Nebraska and Oklahoma in their entirety, and most of Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. America is on its way to becoming the greatest nation in the world.